Dear friends, we have time in our closing moments to talk to one another. You have heard each other, and Karen, I want you to enter into this. And so we want to open it to the questions that you might ask of one another. And perhaps the learnings that have come to mind as you've listened to one another, and even in this last piece, as we become inspired and we see compassion moving throughout the world. But we're far from perfect. And we're far from having gone as far as we can go in the work of compassion. And so could we just reflect with one another, where is the future for compassion? How do we move it to a more powerful place around the world, not just here?
You know, for me, compassion, it's a journey. It's not a process, it's not a step-by-step, but it's a journey. And it's a journey in leadership, and it's a journey in opening that dialogue. It's a journey, a peace has to be worldwide and beginning to change the rhetoric that we see on social media, that we see in TV, to a softer, kinder, gentler, more forgiving. And you're never going to get there totally. We hope we will, but we have to take our ability to talk about that and begin to make people think, did what you say, how did that impact somebody? And how did the journalist who is writing about your interview, or you're going to do a TV interview in a little bit? I hate it when you go and you get attacked. I think if all of us could even have dialogues, we could learn a lot from each other. And I think a whole lot of that is the journey of compassion and moving, raising that awareness and moving forward. That may not answer your question, but.
That wasn't my question.
No, it was Joan's.
Yes.
Well, you know, I think to your point, Betsy, you're absolutely right. But to an earlier point that Karen made, I think it's important for us to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when people say things that are really inappropriate, we sort of think to ourselves, well, that's not very nice. But we don't say anything about it because we don't want to be confrontational, because as a nature, people generally are not confrontational, and we don't want to sort of bite off more than we can chew. But if each of us makes it our business to say, and you don't have to say it in a confrontational manner, you can say, you know, I listened to what you just said, and that wasn't very nice. I remember being in a meeting with my daughter, who was at the time 4, and so that was a long time ago. But it was a meeting where people were being very rude to each other. And she would go to meetings with me all the time, but she started hunching me when she heard the tone change. She said, they're not being very nice. I said, oh, no, it's okay. She's like, no, what that person said was not, you know, and she kept saying it until I had to sit her outside and say to the people when I got back, you know, we are not being very nice to each other. And it took a 4-year-old to really point that out. So, you know, sometimes as adults, we have to be willing to just say that.
We do, and it is uncomfortable sometimes, yeah. But the method of delivery, you know, I think what you said, Karen, about being uncomfortable, but the way you deliver and approach that makes all the difference in the world.
It is important, but I think we've got to be aware that that bad rhetoric is definitely on the increase.
It is.
Yes, it is. It's growing.
Since the Brexit vote, hate crimes and hate speech and threats have increased in Britain by 41%.
Wow.
I was a trustee of the British Museum at the time of the Brexit vote, and visitors were coming to the museum in the first week after Brexit and shouting abuse at members of staff who clearly were not Caucasian, and saying, you've got to go home now. And I think that you may find this happening in this country too, because what happened in Britain was that the rhetoric of politicians during the campaign gave people feel empowered to say this. And this is very, very serious. And you're right about social media, definitely. So somehow we have to make people aware of this. This is not only not acceptable, it's dangerous.
Yes.
We've all had intolerance, and speech comes before action.
Yes.
Hitler was able to do what he did because of a media campaign started in the late 1930s that vilified Jews. And that rhetoric got acceptable. And none of us can say, I mentioned at the end of my speech the Bosnia catastrophe. None of us say this will never happen here.
Good.
That's true.
Because certainly we in Britain have a multitude of sins against other peoples in the past. And you yourself, even in this good and pleasant land, have a history of black people, the slavery issue, the Native American issue. Must be aware, and it can start with loose speech. So I think we've got to, what I'd like to ask you too, all of you, because it's been really inspiring to me to listen to this, because you sit at home sometimes wondering what on earth is going on about the compassion movement. Now I know, wonderful, but how can we keep in touch and work more together? Because I think what we need now is a concerted movement worldwide, where people are linking up with cities, talking to one another, talking across the divide, so that we build a network to counter this rising hatred and
I agree.
We simply have to figure out how are people more patient of each other's views. Whether you're on the right or the left or the middle or where you are, there's something to be learned from every side. And I think we see, and particularly recently in America, we seem to have lost that ability to respectfully and passionately and compassionately listen to that. And we do need to build that and link it together.
I think what we're seeing at the city levels, we're seeing more and more cities and mayors talk about equity and access, because we received a big wake-up call or a reminder in the post-Ferguson world with the civil unrest that took place in Ferguson, Baltimore, and Charlotte, going on and on. What was the street really saying? I mean, there was an officer-involved shooting that usually led to these, but what the street was saying was, I feel disconnected and hopeless about a positive future. The work that we do in our cities around equity, we understand that if everybody doesn't feel like they have an on-ramp to opportunity, that is not good for our city. It is not good morally for the soul of our cities, if that's your entryway. It's not good for the economic development of our cities, because we will not have a workforce that can make us competitive. And thirdly, if I can't get you on either of those two, it's not good for public safety, both within our cities and then on the streets of our cities as well. So I think at the city level, people are coming into this conversation at different times, where this kind of unrest, if there's a good aspect to the Brexit conversation or to political discourse in our country right now, it's making people define who they are and what they stand for. In this past presidential election, I think it's common knowledge that one of the things that put President Trump over was our rural, largely white, blue-class voters, blue-collar voters saying, I need to be connected to a hopeful, positive future. Our minority populations have been saying that for a long time. So between those two areas, do we have an opportunity in our country to come together around new ways to look at this social contract that I talked about earlier? So there should be room for optimism, Karen, in the cities that are, because we have to take this on.
Yes,
if we don't take it on, our cities fall apart.
That's it.
And through the work we're trying to do with our International Center for Compassionate Cities here, that's a way to coalesce that here, just to share best practices. There is a thirst for this.
Yes.
Sure there is.
We've had 40 cities, I don't know if Tom Williams is in the house or not, contact him and us about how can we be a more compassionate city? Look what's going on in Mexico. So it's all of us just kind of rediscovering our roots of who we are.
And
I
it's
think
that-
the
it's-
whole idea of organizing things here, organizing a compassionate cities movement right here in Louisville is huge, is one of the most encouraging things that's happened in the history of the Charter, really. And I think it's a great step forward to create that kind of network and a place where we can talk to each other about our problems, difficulties, challenges, and try to work together for a better world.
But it's engaging people, exactly what you said. I mean, and we've had a big engagement campaign in Fort Worth. Because in big cities, in small cities too, people get complacent and very disconnected. And we had an issue recently, and somebody, one of the older people that's retired, said, you know, be careful what you ask for. You ask for your community to be more engaged, and now they're coming and telling you at council what they want and telling you when they see you in the beauty shop. And I said, and yes, we have to learn from that. We have to figure out where the very uncomfortable touch spots are and give them an on-ramp to being where everyone else is.
I think that maybe to hear what social organizations do that are mayors had to ask, they have really the answers for some real problems. And sometimes the organizations are not enough listening from the mayors. So listen to them, because they have the opportunity to help make the cities and compassionate cities if you help them to do it.
It's a partnership.
Yes.
I think
Yes,
you're absolutely
You know, I
right.
have to
listening
make myself
phase. The
very
listening's critical.
unpopular. This is my most unpopular moving of the day, to say that we are coming to that moment when we have to keep up the conversation across the lines here, but that we must bring to a conclusion this particular session. And I just must say, thank you all for what you've offered to us, and for you, for your listening, and for...
And could we also have a huge round of applause for Joan and this incredible panel? Thank you all. This has been extraordinary.